You are listening to WebFit News Live Radio. News that fits your fast life.
Today we're going to get into a crisis that's hitting New Zealand's main streets and hitting them hard. We're talking about a huge spike in retail crime. And it's not just about stuff being stolen, it's about safety, it's about fear, and it's really about the heart of communities. We're going to look at the government's big response, this special advisory group, and, well, all the controversies that are already popping up around it. Let's get right into it.
Look, this isn't a story about some big, faceless corporations. This is about your local dairy, the corner convenience store, family-run shops, and the people who work so hard behind the counter. These places are often the lifeblood of their neighborhoods, and right now, they are on the absolute front line of a crime wave that's getting more violent and incredibly expensive.
And when I say expensive, the cost is just staggering. The government's own advisory group estimates that retail crime is draining the national economy of over $50 million every single week. That adds up to more than $2.5 billion a year. It's a number so big, it's kind of hard to wrap your head around, but what it represents is a massive threat to the country's economic stability.
Okay, so to really understand this whole complex issue, we're going to break it down into 5 parts. First, we'll look at the crisis itself. Then, we'll meet the government's handpicked advisors. We're going to examine their pretty controversial proposals, take a hard look at the cost of this whole operation, and we'll finish up with a really serious, unanswered question about transparency at the very top.
So, let's kick things off with Part 1, a crisis on Main Street. This is where we need to look past those billions of dollars and see the very real, very human impact of this crime wave.
This quote, and it comes from the advisory group itself, just captures the reality perfectly. We are talking about incidents like what happened at the Alpawa Dairy in Christchurch. The owner, Kamlesh Patel, was attacked so badly he actually needed surgery. Or another case over in Heathcote, where a worker was held at gunpoint. You see, this isn't just shoplifting. It's violent, it's traumatizing, and it's happening way too often.
So why is this all happening? Well, a lot of advocates argue the problem isn't really with the police. They're often making arrests pretty quickly. The issue, they say, is a justice system that feels more like a revolving door. Offenders, and some of them are shockingly young, are quickly released with what a lot of people see as no real consequences. Then, of course, they just go out and do it again.
Which brings us right to Part 2, enter the crime advisors. Faced with this growing crisis and a whole lot of public anger, the government decided it needed a totally new game plan.
So, in July 2024, it created the Ministerial Advisory Group, or MAG for short. It's an independent group whose whole job is to give the government concrete, practical ideas to tackle retail crime. It's led by its chairman, Sonny Kaushal, who's been a community advocate and business owner for a long time, and he's really well known for fighting for the rights of small shopkeepers.
And the MAG's mission? Well, it's pretty aggressive. They're looking at things like empowering security guards, giving business owners the power of citizen's arrest, and even using facial recognition technology. They've got a budget of $1.8 million a year, and it's drawn, pretty symbolically, from the proceeds of Crime Fund, basically using criminals' money to fight crime. Okay, let's move on to Part 3. Because, as you can imagine, when you propose really aggressive solutions, you often get some pretty aggressive pushback. This is where we get into the controversial new tools.
So, one of the MAG's biggest ideas is to expand the power of citizen's arrest. Now, in theory, this would mean a shop owner or a security guard could physically hold a shoplifter or someone being aggressive right there on the spot until the police show up. It's a direct answer to all those calls for more power on the front lines.
But, and this is a big but, this idea has created a major split. The MAG says it empowers retailers to stop crime dead in its tracks. On the other side, though, you've got retail organizations and workers' unions who are basically sounding the alarm. They're worried it's just going to lead to more violence, putting young or untrained workers in incredibly dangerous situations. Their argument is simple. Fighting crime is not a retail worker's job.
And that debate doesn't just stop there. It naturally leads to another, maybe even more intense question. If you're going to empower retailers to confront criminals, what about personal defense? And this brings us to the whole dilemma over pepper spray. The MAG has floated the idea of letting shopkeepers use it as a personal safety aid, a non-lethal tool for self-defense. But the industry is horrified. Their biggest fear is that if shopkeepers have it, criminals will get it too. And that could lead to this arms race where every petty theft suddenly risks becoming a chemical assault.
So the policy ideas are really divisive, but the controversy, believe me, it doesn't end there. Let's get into Part 4, the high cost of justice, where we're going to follow the money.
The MAG has a pretty hefty annual budget of $1.8 million. Now, supporters will say, hey, that's a small price to pay to solve a multi-billion-dollar problem. But critics have started asking some tough questions about exactly how that money's being spent.
One of the figures that has really grabbed a lot of media attention is the chairman's pay. Sonny Kaushal is contracted at a rate of $920 per day. In the group's first year alone, he invoiced for over $238,000.
And beyond just the high daily rate, a specific financial issue has raised some serious red flags. An irregularity was found with the withholding tax on the chairman's invoices, which added up to just over $15,000. Now, in simple terms, that just means the correct amount of tax wasn't being set aside from his payments like it's required to be. For a group whose entire job is to restore law and order, any kind of question about financial compliance is, well, it's a serious problem.
So this financial picture is really crucial. You've got a multi-million-dollar budget, high daily rates for the chairman and other contractors, and a $100,000 a year office in Auckland. Now, the official defense is that this is less than 0.07% of the cost of the actual crime itself, but for critics, these numbers, especially combined with that tax issue, they raise big questions about oversight and whether taxpayers are getting value for their money.
And all of that leads us to our fifth and final section, where things get even murkier. We're calling it an unanswered question, and it all revolves around a secret memo that goes right to the heart of government accountability. It's now been confirmed that Ministry of Justice officials actually wrote a memo to the Justice Minister about the chairman's concerning behavior. The timing suggests this might be related to those financial issues, but the government is flat out refusing to release the document, saying it's protected by legal privilege. This just raises a huge question that's now hanging over this entire operation. What exactly was so concerning that top officials felt they had to formally warn the minister? And if the whole goal here is to restore public trust and order, why is this specific advice being kept under lock and key?
And this is the fundamental contradiction, isn't it? On one hand, you have secret, official advice about concerning behavior. And on the other, you have the Minister of Justice standing up in public and saying that the chairman has his full confidence, while just dismissing the whole thing as a private matter. It creates this bizarre paradox, a government that's championing law and order while at the same time appearing to choose secrecy over transparency.
So this is where we end up. New Zealand is facing a genuine, serious crisis that really does demand bold action. But this whole story just reveals this deep tension between that urgent desire for solutions and the basic principles of good government. And it leaves us all with a critical question to think about. When the pressure is on, how should a government balance the need to act fast with the duty to lead transparently? And maybe more importantly, what happens to public trust when that balance gets broken?